You may have been on this spiritual path for quite some time now. You may have tried different techniques, different practices, different observations, inquiries. You may have done stuff like law of attraction, prayer, meditation. You may have looked at self-inquiry from a non-dual perspective. There are so many different paths, different practices. But you may also hear that essentially at some point the illusion of separation dissolves. No more do you see a sense of separation between yourself and anything, or you do not see separation or distance between objects anymore. You see a totality, you see a oneness, and in other words, you see all that there is. But why do you still feel as though you are separate? Because you may have psychologically deduced that there is no separation. You may have psychologically and mentally agreed with yourself, come up through a series of logical questioning, through logical thinking and introspection, that yes, there is no separation and that separation is an illusion. But yet you still feel that there is a sense of separation. There is still a sense of I that takes claim and takes hold of experiences. You may still feel that you are indeed separate. When I speak to another individual, this individual is not me. There is no way that this other individual can be me. And this all roots into one thing. And the root of this, of the reason as to why you still feel like life is separate, is essentially that you are still subscribed to the story. You are still very deeply involved or entangled in the story, in the separate sense of self. There is this ongoing narrative in everyone's life. The story of who you are, the story of where you've come from, the story of what you believe in, the ideas that you hold dearly to, the belief systems, ideologies that you are subscribed to, nationality, religion, skin color, gender. There are so many categories that are intertwined with a story, and each category, something within it is subscribed to, and as a whole this is accumulated into a form of identity, a form of story. And then life is carried out in such a way where it's to serve this story, it's to serve this egoic personhood, this narrative of who you are. And this narrative is constantly fueled with further experiences. Every action, every decision, every opinion is there to empower or provide some sort of service to this egoic self that is separate, to the story that I'm speaking about, to the ideology. And so it's time to not subscribe into this anymore. It's time to loosen the amount of value we give this story. It's time to reflect and observe this story for what it really is. We are not trying to get rid of the story. We are not trying to forget the story. We are not trying to attack the story. This very story of who you are is a part of existence that is being realized. This story is appearing in reality to be realized. But then it's really about what is it that you are doing with this story? How do you value this story? How do you carry this story on your shoulder? Because that is really the pinpoint and the determining factor that determines how you maneuver in life. Whatever action you take, are you taking it to serve this story itself, or are you taking a particular action to serve a greater good, something that is beyond the story, something that transcends the identity and the separate self of I? And so I want this to be somewhat of a reflective video or a reflective conversation. I'm not here to try and prove to you anything. I want you to just see what is taking place right now. And so when I ask the question of who are you, or who is there, or where are you, look at the answer that comes up. The way to really dissolve the sense of separation is to highlight the separation that is there. People think that we have to run away from the ego, run away from the sense of self or the sense of identity in order to let go of it. But no, let's really turn around and observe it. Let's really look at this. Who are you? What are you doing? Where are you? Anything that is, any sort of question that surrounds you, what comes up? What imagery comes up? What concept comes up? What memory comes up? We want to look at this because we want to realize that firstly there is the story. Because once we realize that there is a story, let's create some space for appreciation. Let's appreciate that there is this sense of you, the sense of I. Direct some love towards this sense of I. This sense of I is an object appearing in reality, just like any other object that appears in reality. And every object that appears in reality, as soon as it's separated from the totality of reality, it's in question. So when I say that there is a sun, the sun is shining, as soon as I call it sun, the sun is now in question. The sun is now the focal point of the conversation, or the focal point of the narrative, or the focal point of what is happening right now. But if we observe this focal point, eventually we realize that there's the conceptual sun that we have created over time to try and identify and to create some pathway to describe certain objects in reality. And the same goes with the sense of identity, the sense of who you are. There's a story of who you are. This very story, what's your relationship with this story? If we sincerely turn around and look at this sense of I, eventually what starts to happen is we see it for what it really is. And that's all we want to do. We don't want to regard or disregard the story. We don't want to attack the story. We don't want to hate the story. We want to introduce a sense of appreciation because that creates the space to understand. Understanding transcends the topic. If we understand a problem, the problem has been solved. If we understand the sense of identity, the sense of who you are, if we really see it for what it really is, it naturally dissolves. And as we observe the sense of I, the story, this feeling of familiarity when I say I, what is it really? And then we can ask, who is it that is looking at this I? If I am me, then how am I observing me? Am I observing myself? If I am this story, how am I able to see and recollect and observe this story? Surely that which observes the story cannot be the story. Now this may give rise to some emotions, some reaction. This may not be a very pleasant direction to take when investigating the sense of I. But that's okay. This is why we want to come from a place of appreciation and a place of love. If there is the openness of the heart, whatever it is that we do becomes beautiful in a way. And that very beauty is more viable than the fear that may arise when observing oneself. Because this is really something that is within your grasp to realize that you are not separate, that there is no separation. This is something within your grasp to realize, but there's always some form of subconscious or conscious excuse stopping you from really looking at this. There is the desire to liberate yourself from yourself, but at the same time, there is also the desire to not lose yourself. So when observing this, when really entering into the direction of what is happening, we may feel some sense of fear, we may feel some sense of anger even. And so we want to just allow whatever arises to arise, just as the sense of I is appearing within reality. And we are just observing this. And then eventually you may realize that whatever it is that is doing the observing cannot be switched on or off. And whatever it is that is observed, or whatever it is that appears in reality, that can be switched on and off. This is what changes. This is what moves. And so from the place of consistency that cannot be switched off, from the place of consciousness, from the place of being, that comes even before the very story, from the place of being, from the place of existing, from the place of awareness, that is even allowing us to realize what is appearing within the field of awareness, within the contents of experience. We want to then observe the sense of I that feels so familiar. And this is all that needs to be done. This story, this childhood story, your beliefs, the things you stand for, we are not trying to destroy this. We are not trying to disregard this. We are just trying to observe it. The same way you observe any story. When you read a book, when you watch a movie, what takes place? There is that which is watching the movie. There is that which is reading the book. There is that which is realizing and going along with the story. But what is the relationship between that and the story? What belief systems, what thoughts, what projections have been imprinted upon this story? One example of a belief system is that this story is me. This is who I am. Another belief system that may have been set in place somewhere down the line along the development of this story is that this is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. Which indirectly always goes back to the very small or the initial belief that this is me. This is who I am. So there is the constant fueling of the narrative. There's the constant fueling and emphasis that this is you. But who you truly are does not require any emphasis, does not require any conviction. Who you truly are is and just is. Who you truly are does not need convincing that this is what you stand for. Who you truly are does not need a belief system to uphold itself. Who you truly are is in the perception of all belief systems. Who you truly are is in the realization of all thoughts and ideas and pictures and images and memories and opinions. So this is a place that we want to rest into. And as soon as we try to even ask these questions, the story itself will highlight certain moments or highlight certain concepts or ideas to reel you back in. It will reel you back into the story. Like, hey, what about your job? Or what about your daughter? Or what about your parents? Or what? It will reel certain powerful moments and emotions within the story to keep you subscribed and to keep you engaged and entangled as though you are the story, even though the story is just observed. And this is also the very same root as to why every action, every opinion, everything that is spoken, everything that is done is to serve the story, to serve the ego, to serve this false sense of separation of who you are. But as soon as we create space to observe and we inject some appreciation and love into this space, eventually we may realize that this love has no boundaries. Eventually we may realize that this presence has no boundaries. Stories are stories because there are defined boundaries and there's a defined trajectory into where the story is going and where it came from. But the sense of who you really are has no boundaries, has no trajectory. It's there to observe all trajectories and boundaries. It's there which allows you to see any form of boundary. And so as we rest in this sense of being, and we rest in that sense of being, the sense of presence permeates all stories anyway. The sense of presence comes before all stories and will be there after every story. Once again, this does not mean that we are trying to disregard or reject your belief systems or ideologies or whatever it is. No. We are just trying to understand what's happening regardless of the belief systems and ideologies and so on. They can stay there. We are entering a holy place and we are just deciding to leave our shoes outside. Once we are finished, we can go back and pick up and wear our shoes again to walk the path of the story again. That's fine. But for the moment, we can just rest into being. Rest in that being. Rest in that love. There is no condition for the sense of being, and there is no condition for the love either. Thank you so much for watching. If you really enjoyed this, I recommend watching this video here. This is Hassan from the Spiritual Walks, and we are all on a journey towards the truth.